All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this cold Northern California evening. My name is Masha Merkulova. I am founder and the executive director of Club Z. We are a Jewish teen youth movement that was born here in Silicon Valley with a specific mandate to educate teenagers about Jewish identity, Jewish history, and connect them to their roots in the land of Israel. As the result of this work, what we're seeing happening is that a lot of our students, especially those in public high schools, are being harassed and really alienated. What is troubling is that it's not really whatever's happening with the students peer-to-peer, it's one thing. What is troubling is that there is a lot of misunderstanding and there's not a whole lot of knowledge about who are the Jews and what is anti-Semitism. And as a service really to the community, what we would like to do is to present this workshop about anti-Semitism, what it manifests is like today, and also origins of it to the teachers. We believe that education is the most important thing that any generation can do. So we're here to educate, we're here to be a resource for the teachers that are in the classroom. And as such, I wanted to make sure, because I know it's been a very challenging, very difficult year for anybody who is in the classroom, difficult last 2 years. So as a appreciation of us taking your time to learn about this topic, we would like to offer any teacher who is currently teaching in the high school, in any high school, we would like to offer you a $25 gift card and a lesson plan that you can use in your curriculum. The way that we will do the gift card is you'll need to send us your school address, and we will send it to the school, and we will let the administrators know to provide you with that card once you send us the address and we verify that you indeed work there. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Naya Lekht, who is our Director of Education. Dr. Lekht has completed her PhD at UCLA in the studies of Russian comparative literature. And she is a scholar of anti-Semitism of the past and on the present. So she's really quite well suited to be the resource, to be the educator for those who are in charge of the most important resource that we have, and that is our children. So Naya, it's all yours.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone really for taking your time this evening on a Tuesday evening at 7:30 to come and study and workshop a very heavy topic. So today indeed we are here to learn and discuss Jew hatred that goes by several names. I have prepared a presentation, so I will share my screen. I really hope that we can take this time tonight as educators to really bring this information into our classroom in whichever way capacity. We at Club Z deal with teens from 8th grade to 12th grade. And what we found is, whether intentionally or unintentionally, our teens do face, as Masha Merkulova said, harassment, alienation, marginalization, both by sometimes teachers inadvertently, peer-to-peer, and of course on social media. And what we found is that a lot of the times people just don't understand what is anti-Semitism. They conflate it with other forms of hatred, such as racism or xenophobia, but it's a very particular type of hatred. So I'm going to begin sharing my screen, and it's a very interactive presentation. So I will, if anybody wants to be in dialogue with me, that'd be great. But if not, I'm going to call on Masha to be my student. A lethal obsession, anti-Semitism then and now. And really the higher kind of title is The Genealogy of Jew Hatred, Conceptualizing the Topology of Anti-Semitism. So what are my objectives as an educator? And once you receive this lesson plan, you will also, the lesson plan will come with learning objectives. My learning objectives today is to discuss with you all the history of anti-Semitism and why it is the most dangerous and not really studied virus. And we will talk about it as a virus. I want to teach you how to learn to identify anti-Semitism. I'd like to explain why anti-Zionism is today's most dangerous form of Jew hatred. And I want to talk about Teachers Resource Lab at the end. So a few data points that are really important, and I think we see them in the news, so bear with me if this is redundant for some of you. But in general, we have seen, as of May of last year, in 2021 actually, 75% increase in anti-Semitism in the United States. Now, we know that in May, there was a conflict between Gaza and Israel. And that conflict, the hatred or the tension was outsourced to Jews living in the diaspora, Jews living in America, in the UK, and in Europe in general, and in Canada. And so we see an uptick in anti-Semitism surging as a result of the tension brewing in the Middle East. And you see this graph also showing. So it is on the rise and it manifests in different ways, which we'll discuss today. At the same time that all of this is happening, if one were to look at the various Jewish organizations, the major institutions that are trying to bring awareness on anti-Semitism, and I'm listing them on the left-hand side, tons and tons of Jewish establishment and institutions that are really trying to spotlight and help and bring awareness. So the research question one must ask is, how is it that anti-Semitism, both in rhetoric and behavior, is surging despite the plethora of educational initiatives? Why is that happening? So I think we must begin, as anybody who's an educator, we begin with questions, and we begin with the most essential one. How do we frame anti-Semitism? In other words, how do we study it? Is it a form of intolerance, right? Is it kind of a universal form of intolerance? Is it bigotry? Is it a form of racism or racism? Is it a violation of human rights? Or does it deserve its own study? So I want to leave you with that question, and we'll return to it at the end. Now, Masha, since you're my premier student, when do you think anti-Semitism began? If you had to say, when did it begin in history?
Well, I mean, you know, the most example that is cited is the Holocaust, so 1930s.
Okay, so, right, well, actually, it is the longest hatred. Robert Wistrich, and you will receive upon a completion of this workshop, detailed list of resources, calls it the longest hatred, not because Jews want some sort of brownie points, like, oh, we were hated first and we're the most hated group. It just happens to be that when Jews became a people, anti-Semitism also started. And that's important because other forms of hatred that are more modern, such as xenophobia and homophobia and racism, they didn't really exist. So there's much we can learn from studying this longest hatred as a prototype for other hatreds. So Masha, I'm going to do a little experiment with you today. What is this called?
A cup.
Okay. Well, how do you know that it's a cup?
Because I can see that it's a cup.
But why is it a cup?
We didn't rehearse this, Naya. We should have rehearsed this. Because it's an object that is meant to hold water and it has a handle.
Beautiful, excellent. It's actually better that we didn't rehearse. But what about this? Is this a cup as well?
Well, this is where English becomes confusing because it's called paper cup, but it should be called a glass.
Mm-hmm.
Paper glass.
But you just told me that this has a function. What did you say? What was the function of this?
Hold water. Okay, there you go.
Does this hold water?
Yes.
And what about this?
Yes.
And what about this?
Yes.
What about this?
Oh, I like one of those right now, please. Whatever goes inside.
And this?
Makes me sleepy, but yes, it holds wine.
Okay.
My morning coffee right there.
So all of these go by different names, but functionally, what do?
Same
They
thing.
hold water.
They hold liquid.
Okay, excellent. I want us to talk about Jew hatred. And I want to introduce you to how the language changes, but not the phenomenon itself. The language for Jew hatred, if we're looking at the cup example, functionally, it's the same. Now, I'm going to give you kind of a zoomed out vision of Jew hatred through 3 epochs, 3 time periods in European history. This is the Middle Ages, this is 19th century modern Europe, and this is contemporary. In each iteration of Jew hatred, the Jew hater changes the term for the hatred of the Jew. Now that's important. So for instance, during the time of Judeophobia, the idea was that Jews are violators of the Christian tenets. Why? They're Christ killers. They killed Christ, deicide, right? And even worse, the worst crime is that they didn't take Christ as their savior. Okay. And in this time period, which spans probably, I would say, the 7th century all the way to the 16th century, 17th century, the primary form of Judeophobia was rooted in this violation. Now, we know that the Enlightenment occurred, and after the Enlightenment, Europe moved towards a more rational model of understanding the world. Now, this Jew hatred virus, this hatred, changes to a different name. And I have to tell you all, as a teacher, when I started teaching on this topic, I took for granted the word anti-Semitism. I thought, oh, it must have existed for hundreds and thousands of years. Actually, it didn't, and I'll walk you through it. The term anti-Semitism was coined in 1878. Well, that's strange. Jew hatred has existed for thousands of years. Why change the name? And we'll discuss this. So in the 19th and 20th century, the Jew now became the violator of the purity of race. Now, this is important. This sounds crazy and terribly racist, but at one time, this was progressive. Social Darwinism was a science. Race was a science. That was a way to kind of have a taxonomy of humans. Today, if you call anybody an anti-Semite, that is not a good thing. And it's shifted now the word to anti-Zionist. Now the Jew vis-a-vis the state of Israel again finds themselves in violation. What's their violation? Violation of human rights. Now let me unpack this for you further. Let's go back to Judeophobia. This is Saint Augustine, a really important Christian theologian. And really, if I had to really simplify and boil it down, it was, again, rooted in the accusation that Jews killed Christ. Saint Augustine focused on the Jews as the enemies of God, and they destroy the spiritual character of Christianity. What do? How do you fix this? You de-Judaize Europeans. You annihilate the Jewish faith. That was the answer in Judeophobia. The word anti-Semitism was coined by a German non-Jewish man. His name was Wilhelm Marr. Wilhelm Marr's conception of anti-Semitism focused on the supposed racial as opposed to religious characteristics of the Jews, right? It has it changed and mutated into a different type of hatred, because you have to understand, when Wilhelm Marr was peddling and marketing this form of anti-Semitism, this form of Jew hatred, he vociferously said, I'm not a Judeophobe. I have nothing in common with them, because he's a man of science. How could he believe the Jews were Christ killers? There was, quote unquote, no Christ. So it changed. And this was a very, very pivotal moment in how we understand how Jew hatred really changes to fit the times. So what was the answer? And we know what the answer to anti-Semitism, it's the annihilation, the genocide of the Jewish race, the attempted genocide in the Holocaust. Notice that both for Judeophobia and anti-Semitism, the end result is genocide, is annihilation. It's annihilationist, okay? Now, once again, I want to now kind of do a different analysis of this diagram. What's interesting for us, and anybody here on this call who's a teacher of history or social studies, when you're teaching with your students about medieval Europe, 19th century Europe, contemporary Europe, I don't know if this is something you discuss with your students, but this is something certainly we do. We discuss what is the moral code for society, civilization during a specific time. In medieval Europe, Christianity served as this North Star of how to understand the world based on good and evil. The Jew became then the violator. Well, that came out of fashion in the 19th and 20th century. That Northern Star was race, social Darwinism, which sounds crazy to us today, but it was. It was a way to understand the world in Europe. Today, if you think just for yourselves today, anything you consume in the news, whether it is on social media or newspapers, everything is couched, framed in human rights. We today in the 21st century care about human rights. There's nothing wrong with that. That's great and important, but understand that each time the Jew is that which society and civilizations deem to be evil and something that violates those tenets. It's really important. We're going to go into the second part of this workshop, which is how do we understand anti-Semitism? Well, to understand anti-Semitism, we kind of have to do Jewish history, but we don't have time to do Jewish history tonight. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about it as a virus. Now, we've become virologists, I understand today. Let me tell you that viruses, what kind of basic virus 101, they attack the host body, they take over the host body, they can be slow acting, fast acting, they cannot really reproduce on their own. They have a unique DNA, by the way, and RNA structure. That's really important. And they evolve and mutate. We know this, right? We know that they evolve and mutate. Now, this is really important for understanding if Jew hatred is a virus and it mutates from Judeophobia to anti-Semitism to anti-Zionism. How are you going to know that it's anti-Semitism if it's such a wily virus? It has such an amazing way to evolve to fit the times. Remember, from Christianity, social Darwinism, human rights. How are you going to identify it? So I've come up with a different approach to understanding Jew hatred. Instead of looking at definitions, I'm going to walk you through today what I call the 6 nucleotide sequence of this virus. Viruses have a DNA RNA sequence, ABC, ABC, ABC. If you want to create an amazing vaccine that works, you need to isolate that sequence. So I'm isolating the sequence with you today of Jew hatred. And that is blood libel, power, accusing Jews of having power, usurping power, world domination, demonization, dual loyalty, dehumanization, and avarice or greed. What's amazing, well, it's not really amazing, but what's amazing for us as educators is that it's a whole different way of understanding Jew hatred. So in other words, if I put you in the 14th century or the 18th century, the 21st, you will see that the accusations actually are the same. Let's walk you through these accusations. I do not know in this room today, in our virtual room, what your levels of knowledge are. So I'm going to assume that we're kind of tabula rasa. We're starting with not much prior knowledge into these accusations. These are kind of crazy. So I'm just going to walk you through the idea that Jews drink blood. Okay. I don't know if any of you have ever seen it, come across it, but it started in the 12th century in England with a murder of a boy. His name was William of Norwich. He was from the town of Norwich, and he was murdered. This is true. There's a book written about him and about that event. He was gruesomely murdered. He was crucified and his blood was drained. This is one of the first depictions of William of Norwich. His blood was drained. 70 years later or so, a monk comes into the town of Norwich, and here's the story of William. What monks do is they write the lives of saints. It's called hagiography or hagiography, depending how you pronounce it. And a monk kind of can become famous by writing these saints' lives. So we have a monk who's coming in the town of Norwich, And he's motivated by becoming famous. So he hears this story, it's crazy. And he finds out that it happened during the time of this group called the Jews, who celebrate this holiday called Passover, where they make this crazy bread. I don't know, oh, sorry, not bread, crazy unleavened bread called matzah. I don't know if any of you have ever seen it. It's like a dry cardboard, literally. And he inserts in the story of William of Norwich in this book, it's not even central to the story, it's very peripheral, that he was murdered by Jews and that the Jews ensnared him into a forest. They crucified him and drained his blood. Now that's crazy. And you would think, who would believe that? Blood libel is an accusation that spread like wildfire across continental Europe. I'm from the former Soviet Union. So is Masha. It existed in the Russian Empire. It existed in the Soviet Union. It existed in the Middle East. And it definitely existed in Europe. It's a very, very rife accusation that is really everywhere. Now, I want to show you how this crazy idea that Jews kidnap non-Jewish children, it's always non-Jewish children. That's very important to the topology of this particular accusation. So here, I'm just showing you images from across the world. Here we have, as I told you, one of the earliest depictions of William with Jews draining his blood. Here we have a Jewish man. He's got blood dripping down his Dracula-like teeth, and he's about to take a bite from a boy. Now, this boy is not just a boy. He is shrouded in a Palestinian flag. Now, a lot of people will say, and I'm assuming tabula rasa. I do not know how much people know about this conflict. Let's say nothing. It doesn't really matter. I don't care actually who is being depicted. I care about the trope. And this is a trope uniquely used to smear and slander the Jewish people. So here we've got, you could say, oh, somebody could push back on me and say, you know, Naya, this is just political. It's political criticism. Why are you making this about anti-Semitism? Well, unfortunately, that particular trope, once again, is so particular to the Jewish experience, to the topology of anti-Semitism or Jew hatred, that it doesn't even matter. The politics here are not even relevant. It's how it's being depicted. Once again, here we have an IDF soldier using a dagger, which is the state of Israel, to kill a boy. And this boy is a Palestinian boy because of the colors of the flag. And the blood is rushing out. Here, this was last May, New York Times published, front page of New York Times, published this kind of bevy of children, of Palestinian children allegedly murdered by Israel. They had to, by the way, rescind this front page because they found out that some of these kids were not even killed in this conflict. Some of these kids were not even killed in the conflict between Israel and Hamas. But that's not even important because what was the damage was done, because the damage was Jews, the state of Israel is out for children, out for blood. That is blood libel. I want to show you how deeply entrenched this accusation is within the Arab world. And this is very recent. This is the Abraham Accords. I'm not sure if anybody knows, but the Abraham Accords were an attempt, and really hopefully we hope to succeed, between Arab countries, certain Arab countries with Israel to have normalization. So here is a cartoon. In Arabic, it says normalization. Here it says Arab government, and here it says Gaza. Now, this goes beyond political criticism because once again, it taps into an age-old blood libel. You know, the shaking of the hand, instead of the hand, we've got the pistol, and the pistol is aiming and murdering innocent children. Here we have, this is from Iran. You could read the caption. This is from 2020. Here you have, this is also commentary on the Abraham Accords, this evil Israeli Jewish general shaking hands with this innocent UAE Arab leader who now has blood on his hands. And of course, they are trafficking in the conflict. And we've got this river of blood. Here, this is an anti-Israel protest in the UK, where you have fake blood on the Israeli flag. And again, all for criticism, all for challenging. But once you tap into something that has, I mean, I didn't spend a lot of time on this, how this particular type accusation, how it affected the Jewish community in Europe. But as it moved from England in the 12th century to Spain, to Italy, to France, to the Russian Empire, Jews paid the price for the accusation of blood libel, of basically being bloodthirsty. The second accusation of this, remember, six accusations of the virus, 6 nucleotides, is this idea that Jews dominate the world. I'm sure you've all heard the Jews own the banks, Hollywood, the media. Behind every rich rapper, there's a even richer Jew, you know. This idea of Jewish world domination comes from the Russian Empire at the turn of the 20th century. And it was, again, a lie. The Tsar in 1903 in Russia, Tsar Nicholas II, said that he came upon a book. Oh my God, and lo and behold, can you believe this? This book is by Jews, and it's about how they're going to take over the world. It was called The Elders of the Protocol of Zion. These elders, these old elders of Zion. I mean, for the Russian imagination, Zion, Jew, it's one and the same. Zionist Jew. Just like blood libel, this idea of world domination and power, right, spread like wildfire across Europe. So in 1903, the Tsar found this book. By 1918, the book was translated in all dominant European languages. Now, again, I want to show you a plethora of this accusation from across the world. This is from Germany, this is from Soviet Union, this is from the New York Times, and this is from an Arab leader. Let's go to the Soviet Union. In Russian, it says Arab countries. And we see a general, bloodthirsty general with his dagger, and he's ensnaring the entire Middle East, the Arab countries, controlling the Middle East. German cartoon shows Israel as a spider ensnaring the Middle East, right? World domination, dominating the Middle East. And this particular tweet, you should make the world understand that Israel is the oppressor and that Israel must be destroyed. I mean, it's for all intents and purposes, this is a wonderful quote in the sense that it's very transparent. There's really not much we need to decode here. But we live in a world right now where we're looking at things from the lens of oppressor and oppressed. Israel, because it is strong, militarily it is strong, economically it is strong, it is a strong country. And so what happens is the idea of power, the idea of world domination is being applied, if in the 19th century to the Jew, now to the state of Israel. Here's a cartoon from the New York Times from 2018. Showing a former president of the United States, Trump, with the former prime minister of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu. Never mind that the Jewish prime minister looks like a dog. What's really the problem here is that he is like a service dog leading a blind president. Who is really leading America? Who is dominating the United States? It's the Jews. It's Israel. Who is dominating 19th century Europe? It's the Jews. So it's it's resurfaced again, this idea of power, and even more so because we see through the world through a lens of that which has power must be corrupt, and those who are powerless or the underdog must be good. And because Israel is a powerful country and the Palestinians are disenfranchised, are the underdogs, immediately that accusation of world domination is applied to the state of Israel. Demonization. This is really important. And I believe that we are living in a time, and we'll discuss this in a little bit, where Jew hatred is all about demonization. So remember, the first one was blood libel, the second one was world domination, and the third one is demonization. And it comes from about the 3rd or 4th century Christian Europe. Remember when I told you that the Jews were the violators of Christianity, and their first violation was that they killed Christ, and the second, even worse one, is that they did not accept Jesus. They did not get on, quote unquote, the salvation train. That was worse, because what the Christian theologians said was, Jews, they look like you and me. They look like humans, but they're actually doing the work of the devil, because they're trying to make you not accept the path of Jesus Christ. So early depictions of Jews in Christian iconography were as devils. This is from Russia, from the Soviet Union. It says Stalin has taken off his mask and lo and behold, you've got a Jew devil behind Stalin. Okay, let's take a look at this tweet, which is anti-Semitic. Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel. I tell my students, if you're uncertain, substitute the word Jew. The Jews have hypnotized the world, and see what you think. And I also ask all of you, if you're not certain, if somebody says Zionists control the world, just say Jews control the world. How does that sound? Now, this is very important that she wrote hypnotize the world, because the Christian idea of the Jews, they have these supernatural powers. They can hypnotize you. They can trick you. They can ensnare you. You wouldn't even know it because they look like human beings. This idea that Jews can hypnotize. And that's why I want to read this out loud. Very important in how we understand different forms of hatred. Anti-Semitism, unlike racism, does not view the Jews as inferior. Rather, it views the Jew as having supernatural powers, being superhuman. Accusations against Jews, such as world domination or killing Christ, contradict racist ideology. Racism is the idea that one race is superior to another. Anti-Semitism in the form of demonization is a completely different type of form of hatred. Now, I wanted to bring your attention to these two images. We don't live in medieval Europe. We don't even live in 19th century Europe. We're in the 21st century. And I think everyone here is in California. Now, if you ask someone in California, hey, have you seen a devil, the Jew devil? They think you're crazy, right? We don't believe in devils. Maybe some people do. I haven't met many people who believe in devils, but we do believe in evil. And if you ask anyone, what was evil in the 20th century? What was evil? Two things. Racism is evil, Nazism is evil, genocide is evil. This is the demonization of Jews, calling it an apartheid state. I don't know how many of you have even heard this accusation being applied to Israel. The goal of it is to demonize, because we do not believe in devils today, but that is the way that you demonize the state of Israel or Jews, comparing Jews or the state of Israel to Nazis. That is a form of demonization. Dual loyalty. So we have blood libel, world domination, demonization, world domination, power, and now dual loyalty. Dual loyalty is very curious. Dual loyalty comes from France. So I'm giving you the origins of each accusation, right? Blood libel, 12th century England, world domination, early 20th century Russia. Dual loyalty comes from the French Revolution in France, where the French emancipated many groups, one of which was the Jews. And there was a very famous Count de Tonnerre, who said Jews should be denied everything as a nation, but granted everything as individuals. Now that sounds lovely, but if you're a Jew, or even more a non-Jew, you're inserting into the population the idea that there's the Jew, the individual, and the Jew who is loyal to some other nation, the Jewish nation. And this particular division within the non-Jewish world as applied to Jews has birthed this dual loyalty. I'll give you two case studies. One is from UCLA in 2014. A Jewish girl, was she tried to be on the student senate. And part of her interview, the following question was asked. Given that you are a Jewish student and are very active in the Jewish community, how do you see yourself being able to maintain an unbiased view, especially when it comes to Israel? What they were doing is checking her loyalty. I tell my students how, or even all the faculty and educators on this call, how would this sit with you if somebody asked another minority, given that you are a Black student and are very active in the African-American community, how do you see yourself being able to maintain an unbiased view, especially when it comes to race relations? That would be unheard of, and it's terrible, it's horrible, but it's really applied to Jews. Another manifestation of this dual loyalty is Jews in positions of power further their agendas. There's this, remember, Jews have their own agenda. There's the Jewish individual, and then there's the Jewish nation. So this idea, like, for instance, let me give you an example. Some of you may be faculty mentors to some of your students, and some of your students may want to write about anti-Semitism. And you say to the student, given that you are Jewish, I feel like, you're kind of using your voice as a Jew to kind of further your Jewish agenda. That is dual loyalty. Dehumanization. Now, this one shares the most with racism. This is anti-Semitism of the 19th century. The idea that Jews are subhuman. When we think of the Holocaust, this is it. But we are living in a post-Holocaust world. And as I showed you, anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, is a very, very advanced virus, and it mutates. But my goal today is, no matter what we call it, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, Judeophobia, if you know the accusations, if you know the nucleotides, the 6 nucleotides of this virus, you will be able to identify it. So this is dehumanization, and again, spanning all parts of the world. This is Germany, a Nazi era newspaper. This is again Germany. This is the Soviet Union. In Russian, it says Zionism, the Zionist spider. This is from Palestinian Media Watch. This is a Jewish, well, this is the Star of David, a rat. And this is the Soviet Union, the Zionist spider. And greed, the idea that Jews are stingy, Jews are rich. This idea of Jews and money also comes from 2 sources. One is Christian, again, and the other is English. Also Christian, but for different reasons. Judah sold Christ for 30 pieces of silver to the Romans. And from there came this idea, well, the Jews can sell you out. Can you really trust the Jews? We have another tweet from Ilhan Omar where she said, it's all about the Benjamins, baby. This was in relation to a Jewish lobby group. This is from the Soviet Union, a capitalist Jew. It says Zionism. And he's like this rich, greedy, fat Jew. Now, I want to take this one step further with you all tonight. In these accusations, blood libel, world domination, demonization, dual loyalty, dehumanization, avarice, they have consequences. I don't know how many of you in this call this evening teach the Holocaust. But if you do teach the Holocaust, I invite you to ask your students, when did the Holocaust start? When did they start killing Jews? People say, when Hitler came to power in 1933. No. Oh, during the Nuremberg laws in 35. No. Kristallnacht in 38. No. The invasion of Czechoslovakia in 39. No. The systematic murder of Jews began in 1941. Now, why am I mentioning this? Because from 1933 to 1941, and that's 8 years, you had a massive propaganda machine working on the population, sending out signals to people. Jews are subhuman. Jews want to dominate the world. By the way, during the Holocaust, blood libel, dual loyalty, and demonization weren't used so much. It manifested mostly in world domination and dehumanization. Now imagine for 8 years, a very sophisticated propaganda machine sending out these signals. And you ask yourself, how is it that the world was ready to dispense with the Jews, with 6 million Jews? There are many answers, but one of those answers is you have to prepare. Once you prepare a segment of a population, then another segment of population is evil, because if they drink blood of children and are out for blood, there's nothing else to say but that they're evil. And if they want to dominate the world and their machinations are behind their puppeteers, they're untrustworthy. If they have demonic qualities, they're evil. Where does their loyalties lie? They're untrustworthy. And if they're subhuman, they're illegitimate. And if all they care about is money, they're untrustworthy. So yeah, you will deny the right of this people to exist. I'm not in any way, I would like to just say, I'm not in any way legitimizing genocide of the Jewish people, but I'm trying to explain. We always scratch our heads. How did people get there? How did the civilization, a very, very advanced European modern civilization, get to this place? There are many answers, but I do believe that when you put out an advanced propaganda machine aimed to, in the case of the Holocaust, dehumanize the Jew, you do prepare the population to answer the Jewish question. And it was the final solution. We're not living in the time of dehumanization. We're living in the time of demonization of the Jew vis-a-vis the state of Israel. I do this example with my teens. Now, Masha, I'd like to invite you back as my premier student. So I talk about antennas. We all have these antennas, whether we're Jewish or not, we have these antennas and they pick up signals. Remember, we're talking about signals of propaganda. Backstory, this is a mural that appeared in 2018 in Los Angeles, huge mural on a business in downtown LA made by a street artist. I'm going to ask you a question in just a second. I'm just giving you more backstory. Now, I'm on all these WhatsApp groups about how to fight anti-Semitism. And I get this picture and they say, Naya, this is so terrible. Can you please call the owner of this building? So I decided I'll call the owner of the building. So this was back in 2018. I called the owner of the building. It was the manager. And he said, listen, I'm getting calls all day. What's going on? And I was like, what's going on? You've got a terrible anti-Semitic art piece, on your wall. And he said, and this, I don't know if he was being serious, genuine, or just pretending, but he asked me, I don't understand why it's anti-Semitic. To me, he said, it's a political statement. Can you explain to me why? And that was a really important moment because I'm an educator and you're an educator. And when you educate, I tell my students, don't run around saying something is anti-Semitic if you can't articulate it. So let me ask you, Masha, using today's workshop and the idea of the 6 accusations, do you believe that there's anything that taps into any of the tropes?
The most obvious one, I would say, is the demonization, right? We're looking at a demon.
Why?
Because there's fire, there is a skull, it's a scary looking creature that is wrapped in an American flag. So it's definitely anti-American. But then there is Stars of David, there's Magen David's on the American flag instead of the 5-point stars. So I guess this is the dual loyalty, right? Like, is America, the world domination, are the Jews controlling America? And thus America is the most powerful country in the world. So are we controlling the world now? So that's the 2 most obvious ones.
Okay. So by the way, I never even notice the fire in the background. So thank you. That's true. So we have this grim reaper, this evil demonic being shrouded in what seems to be a part of an American flag. And there are 5-pointed stars, but interspersed in between are these Jewish stars, which, as you point out correctly, insinuates who's controlling America. And
sorry,
there's something else. Yeah, there's something else. Do you know what this is right here?
Oh my gosh, I did not even notice a child. Okay, so hello, baby. Okay, so
Got this.
this the demon is trying to eat the baby.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right, the innocent child, this idea of, remember, the boy, the child, tapping into the blood libel. So I did. I wrote him an email and I said, "Dear sir, are you aware that your institution or your business is proudly portraying an image that taps into three terrible accusations that have been used against Jews: blood libel, world domination, and demonization. These three accusations have led to the systemic murder of Jews in continental Europe." There's a whole story, by the way, to all of this and how it concludes, which we're not going to get into today because it doesn't really have to do with our talk, with our session. But what I will tell you is that this is an artist who in 2011 traveled to Gaza and met with Hamas. I don't know if you all know, but Hamas is a terrorist organization that rules over a strip of land called Gaza, which shares borders with Egypt and Israel. He came back and was so inspired by whatever conversations he had ensued there that he made this mural, and it was called 9/11 Reimagined. So actually it's worse. It's that 9/11 was an inside job by America, pulled by the Jews. All right, we saw this one before. People, right away when New York Times published this, people really rang the alarm bell. They were like, this is wrong. This is just, no, this is not okay. But it's really important to articulate, why is it not okay? Well, they said the dog, the dog, that's very subhuman, it's dehumanization. And I pushed back with my students. I said, why? This could be a political commentary on a corrupt relationship between two leaders, between two greedy, let's say terrible leaders. Maybe it's a political commentary. Well, he's like a dog. I said, okay, like maybe it's a political, again, I pushed back. And what I do with my students, I like to take them to kind of make them articulate their positions. Well, they're being led by the Jewish leader. I said, so? Well, isn't that a little bit like, world domination? Yeah, okay. But what's the worst part about this political or this anti-Semitic cartoon? It is bad that the Jewish leader has a collar, and on his collar is the Star of David. It is dehumanization. It is a little bit of world domination. But the worst part about this entire cartoon is that this is called a skull cap. This is what Jews wear, men, Jewish boys and men wear on their head. In Hebrew, it's called a kippah. So what is it saying? Not only is the Jewish leader leading the president, he's transformed him into a Jew. Remember that demonization from Christianity? That Jew will look it will lead you so nicely, but it transformed a non-Jewish president into a Jewish president. I want to return to this, our model. All the names that it goes by, whether Judeophobia, whether anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, remember the cups, they all look different, right? The glass, the paper cup, the wine glass, the flask, the water bottle. But functionally, we agreed they hold liquid, warm liquid, cold liquid, functionally. So what does Jew hatred functionally look like? And it looks like this 6 accusations: blood libel, world domination / power, demonization, dual loyalty, dehumanization, and greed. And when I talk about Jew hatred, we must understand that just like in the time of Judeophobia, the answer to the quote unquote Jewish question, it didn't exist then, de-Judaize Europe. The answer to the Jewish question in 19th century anti-Semitism was annihilate the Jewish race. Today's question is annihilate the state of Israel. It's violating human rights. It's an apartheid state, right? What do you do with an apartheid state? You dismantle it. Nobody's sitting around the table thinking, gee, how do we help Israel transition to a democracy? That's not the goal. The goal of Wilhelm Marr was not to say, gee, how do we help the Jews, assimilate better, even though they are subhuman? No, it's annihilationist. So back to the framing that I began with. It's very important not to conflate Jew hatred with racism, though it can share one nucleotide, which is dehumanization. We're gonna miss all the other ones. The flag drenched in fake blood, the comparison of the state of Israel to Nazis and apartheid, the idea that Jews control American politics, the idea that Jews further their own agenda when given a position of power. It's not racism. That's superpowers, if you will. I'll return to this, and I conclude with this diagram. I know it's a little bit difficult, but maybe to kind of comprehend, but I'm going to explain it to you today. Now, we understand that Jew hatred goes by various names. These are the features, and I believe, this is my personal theory, that in each type of Jew hatred, we have a dominant type of accusation. So in Judeophobia in Europe, it was blood libel and demonization. During the time of anti-Semitism, it was dehumanization, dual loyalty, and world domination. Today, blood libel, demonization, and power. These are the main features. Dehumanization is not a feature of anti-Zionism, which brings me to definitions. Now, I don't know how many of you talk with your students about, there's tons of definitions for anti-Semitism. Some say IRA definition, 3D test definition. Here's the ADL. I'm going to read it out loud with all of you. Anti-Semitism, the belief or behavior hostile towards Jews just because they're Jewish. It may take the form of religious teachings that proclaim the inferiority of Jews or political efforts to isolate, oppress, or otherwise injure them. That's a wonderful definition for anti-Semitism because it belongs in the 19th century. That is the definition. That's why if you notice during my presentation, when I said anti-Semitism, I would go back and say Jew hatred, because anti-Semitism is very particular type of Jew hatred that manifests in the 19th, 20th century. Correct. Anti-Semitism is the view that Jews are inferior, but that's not the only way that Jew hatred manifests. Demonization, superpowers, world domination, and the usurpation of power. That's why if you are going to talk with your teens or with your students about anti-Semitism, be mindful of the definitions you use, because while they may sound good, historically, this definition belongs in a definition of Wilhelm Marr, 19th and 20th century. It is not the definition of Jew hatred today. Jew hatred does not view the state of Israel as inferior. That's not how it manifests. So I want to leave time. I'm going to stop sharing. I want to leave time for any questions, any pushbacks, anything really. I see Penelope has unmuted.
I just gave the function for people to unmute themselves. So if they want to ask a question, they can just unmute themselves and go ahead and speak.
Does anybody want to say anything? Are you all?
I do have to tell you that when I was in college, somebody actually asked me if I had horns and if they could see them. And I really didn't know what to say, right? Like, what do you mean I have horns? So that was an interesting experience.
I know it's a lot of information, but my goal today was to synthesize a very complex, misunderstood form of hatred that is very particular, that has a very particular genetic sequence, if you will. And that's one of the first ways to understand, to identify it, is to understand it. I also caution people again what definitions they'll be using, because definitions are outdated. That definition by the ADL is a great definition and a very good one and a very appropriate one for the Holocaust, time of the Holocaust and late 19th century. It is not what Jews are facing today. The idea that Jews are controlling everything, Jews are behind everything, Jews are usurping positions of power. I'm sure many of you heard from your students on social media, Jews are privileged, Jews are white passing. This idea of privilege. Remember, we talked about the world that we live in today. We look at it through a lens of power and powerlessness. Anybody who's in the position of power, immediately bad and corrupt. The idea of privilege is now being applied to Jews.
Naya, I do have, frequently we would hear that, well, listen, this is all great. However, if you're claiming that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, it's not fair. Because Israel is doing really bad things. There's a map of Israel, taking over the land of Palestine. How do you explain that it is actually the same thing? And then Robert raised his hand. So Robert, I'll have you go next.
Well, listen, first of all, I think we need to educate ourselves about the state of Israel, how it was formed. Why did the Jews return there? What was there before? What does the word Palestine come from? What you're referring to is a very, very common map used in high schools and middle schools and colleges called the disappearing map of Palestine, which shows a green country, all green, and it's Palestine. And then it takes you in these 4 panels, 1946, I think it begins. Then at about 1948, a little bit of white seeps in, and that's the Jews coming in. And then by 2012, there's no more green, it's all white. The Jews have completely taken over, they're colonizers. That's just, again, you have to understand how propaganda works. We talk to you about Nazi propaganda and sending out signals. That's false, because there was never, and I'm sorry to say, there was never a country, a sovereign country known as Palestine. That didn't mean that Arabs did not live on the land, which they did, but what they're doing very cleverly in that 4 panel is inserting into all of your students' minds that once upon a time, there was a sovereign country with international borders known as Palestine. And that's just not true. What is true is that there was the British mandate for Palestine. So it would be more accurate if they said the disappearing map of British mandate Palestine, if they wanted to be accurate. But what you're talking about is manipulation of history. And we know, and I know as a student of history, a student of totalitarian regimes, namely the Soviet Union, the Soviets were masters at manipulating truth. You have to start with a little bit of truth. Did Jews start resettling in the land of Israel? Absolutely. Did a lot of those Jews come from Eastern Europe? Absolutely. But there's the logical fallacy. They're colonizers and came to another people's country. There was not a country there. But again, right now, we are living in a time of human rights. It works. We're not living in a time where, Jews are violators of Christianity, or anybody, forget Jews for a second, anybody who violates human rights, it's the worst crime in today's world. So the crime here is coming and taking another people's land, violating their human rights, their rights for self-determination. It's just not true.
So if anybody would like to take us up on the offer, you are welcome to, I'm putting in the email address. It's info@clubz.org, info@club, CLUBZ for Zionism.org. You're welcome to send me your name, the school where you teach, and the school's address. And I will follow up and send you your $25 gift card. And for people that we have emails, we will email you a lesson plan. Naya, is that the plan, to email
Yes, I
you the
also, I
lesson
would
plan?
like, I want to just say a few things that are not content heavy, but more, I'm going to speak to you as teacher to teacher. I don't know most of you who on the call, but I consider myself first and foremost an educator. And I think that our space in the classroom is most sacred. I think that the stories that I've heard from my students who are in Club Z, and I'll just give you two examples, what prompted us today to do this. A student in 6th grade gave a presentation on the Holocaust in honor of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. She did her research, she came to the class, she presented about the Holocaust, she sat down, the teacher thanked her, and this is what happened. Said, and now class, I'd like to ask Susie, let's call her Susie, just okay, anonymity. How does this give you the right, Susie? How does it give your people the right? I mean, I'm sorry you went through such a terrible, terrible thing known as the Holocaust, but it doesn't square in my mind how it gives you the right, how it gives your people the right to go and usurp another people's land and take over their land. Why do they have to be the victims of something else that happened to you in Europe? Now, I sat there and I thought to myself, is this an anti-Semitic teacher? Or is this teacher doesn't understand? But we have a calling as educators. Why would an educator take a subject on the Holocaust and completely turn the class into a political conversation, into a conversation about the conflict in the Middle East? She basically took the conversation from the Holocaust and made it about the conflict. She also put the student on the spot, accusing her people, not just her, your entire people. How does it give you guys the right? Yeah, okay, terrible what happened to you. So that's one story. The other story that prompted us to do this, and we get lots of stories of students, and they feel helpless in the classroom. You have power. We have power as teachers. They don't want to push back. Their grades depend. She wanted to write an article in her newspaper about anti-Semitism. And her faculty advisor, a lovely woman, by the way, a lovely, lovely woman, said to her, but you already wrote about anti-Semitism a year ago. I think you're using your voice as a Jewish person too much for your personal agenda. We talked about this tonight. My student was in tears. Our student was in tears. Literally, her heart sank. And she's like, I can't write about anti-Semitism because I'm using my, first of all, it's an opinion page newspaper part. She goes, but an opinion page part of the newspaper is an opinion. But the teacher continued and almost made her feel guilty for wanting to talk about Jewish things. And she goes, there are other injustices. Why are you focusing on the Jews? And almost insinuating that because you're Jewish, you're focusing on the Jews. And it was very painful. So we have a lot of power in the classroom, and we have to be very, very mindful of what we say, how we say, what information we give to our students. And sadly, the situation is we hear stories upon stories of students who feel helpless in the classroom because a teacher decided to teach about, the Holocaust and all of a sudden talks about the conflict. I'm just here to both educate you tonight, but also to raise awareness on the sacred space of education. And that your students, even our students, I mean, we're not a school, we don't have grades. I welcome them. I tell them, push back on me, challenge me. I want them to challenge me. So that's different. But they're afraid because you hold the power with grades.
Again, thank you everybody for joining. I hope that this could be a beginning of your or continuation of your own educational journeys, and that you could bring the truth and bring something new to the classroom. And we are here to be resources and help you in any way we can.
Thank you. Thank you all for taking the time of your Tuesday evening to be here tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Goodbye.